Leviathan Falls. This is the final book in the Expanse series. 50 chapters, 514 pages, and best described as Where in the World is Winston Duarte? So, Duarte is leader of the Laconian splinter group that was originally Martian. So, this whole series has been about the galaxy, our solar system in the near future. So this is a fantasy space opera series called The Expanse, and there's Earth, Mars, and then the Belt, and all of those are in our solar system. The technology is supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to have been attainable, in the near future. So it's supposed to be recognizable. It's not like, there's no hyper jumping, there's none of that. And so the first encounter with aliens, and specifically alien technology, not the aliens themselves, it's this proto molecule. So the first three books, the proto molecule shows up, starts acquiring resources, and then creates a ring gate. So that's the first three books. There's a lot that happens there. So I would recommend those. And that really sets the stage. And then the fourth book is my favorite because it's the background stories of the four crew members. Really like that. That's one of my favorites of the series. And of course, there's different, I wouldn't say enemies, I would say opponents throughout this. At first it's the protomolecule itself, and then there is, the Outer Planets Alliance, and then there's the Free Navy, there's the Splinter Martian group that becomes Laconia. Each step is like a new opponent in human form, in that, the humans are divided against themselves when they really should be standing against this giant potential threat in of the alien technology. So, back to Laconia. The original four crew members exist along with the leader's daughter, Teresa Duterte, and her dog Muskrat. So there is a pet on a spacecraft, so that adds an element of planning there. And there's a number of new characters, but the big one is the Colonel, and she is, I think it's Tanaka, Colonel Tanaka. She is introduced as a character who's given, a blank check to go find Winston Duterte. So she is a colonel in Laconian military, and she's out to find him, recover him. So the ring gates that were created are all part of a ring space that allow ships to transport from world to world. So the ring gate in the solar system, in our solar system, can be used to transport to any of the other ring gates. So it's kind of like almost like a shortcut. And so this ring space, it is really outside of our universe. Nobody really knows how it works completely. They give a few guesses and explanations, but that's really the centerpiece of this whole story. And so as there's been the human opponents, this final book is really about the original people, right? This ring space was pulled from another universe. And so the people in that universe are lurking behind the gates. And if too many ships go through at too high a speeds with too much energy, the ships go Dutchman, and that's the word for it. They just disappear. They get taken or eaten by these dark phantom figures, and that's really the opponent in this book. Yes, there is a colonel trying to find a human, and there's the original crew members who are trying to escape that colonel, but you also have the whole goal of humanity is to expand to the stars and also avoid going Dutchman and disappearing forever. So Winston Duterte ends up being on the ring space centerpiece, I don't know what to call it, station, and he is trying to hold back the dark figures that hide behind the gates. And so his solution is to make humanity a hive mind and then use that to then push back against the dark figures. The Dark Figures are trying new things because they wiped out the alien species that built the protomolecule. So they're thinking, hey, this humanity is using our gates and our technology, like, I'll just wipe them out too. So it starts switching different things, trying different things, knocks an entire system unconscious, just different things. It keeps trying new things and it eventually succeeds. So, like, time is running out, right? These dark figures can take out, like, almost a whole solar system full of humans. And yeah, so that's the setting. Lots of fun. There's a lot more in there. Like, I could spend the next half hour talking about this and I wouldn't get through even half the plot. So, things I liked, the character changes, right? The beginning, you had the four characters, and I mean, there was more than that. There was a ship crash in the first book, and then these four escaped, but they each kind of grew, right? You had the reserved, Naomi, who then became leader of the underground. You had Alex, who, was this starship pilot who chased away from his family, but then wanted to be part, his change and growth was that he wanted to be with his family and be a grandfather. You had Amos, who is just Amos and has always grown to protect people, that kind of thing. And then Jim, he really recognized that he, wanted to do crazy things and go out there, but he learned, I don't want to call it jumping the shark, but they all recognized themselves and what they were good at, and they may not have changed their personality, but they definitely recognized who they were, across this whole giant book series. So lots of fun. The original four were great. I'm glad they all kind of made it to this book. It's a long story, but the four were represented here. And again, I already talked about it. I really liked that this was like starships in space that nobody really understood what ring space was. And it's a very human thing to use something without understanding it. That just is key. Like, couldn't be more human. So I liked that the aliens weren't alive, right? We didn't see any of the protomolecule builders. We just interacted with their technology and talked about them and all that stuff. Used their gates. And I did really like introducing new characters. I thought for sure as soon as Alex's grandson and daughter-in-law were introduced, I thought, this is late in the series. The only thing that can happen when you introduce a new character late in the series is they get the axe, right? Like, I thought for sure that was going to happen. And I liked that they actually survived and that was a little bit of deception on the part, right? This is two authors, this pen name is two authors, and one of them helped with Game of Thrones. So, you're expecting everybody to get, taken out, bite the bucket, all that stuff. But they actually did a really good job and kind of twisted that cliche. On the flip side, that is actually the only thing I didn't like about this book is that, Colonel of Laconia, Tanaka, she was introduced in this book. So I thought, hey, of course she's gonna, pass away because that's the cliche and everybody follows it. But of course, there was a lot of character growth along the way. But also, like, I feel like every bad guy nowadays has to have, or bad person needs to have some kind of, character story, and you have to see the layers and see why they did what they did, and they end up having a bunch of character growth. I don't know, maybe I just miss days where it was like, this is a bad guy, they're doing bad things, like, we gotta stop them. But so yeah, I didn't like that. And the only other thing I didn't like was, I wish there was like five more of these books. It was really good. The characters kept me wanting to see what happened next with the characters, and it just made it so much fun to read. This was a wonderful series. I haven't seen the TV show, so I don't really know, but there are three quotes in here that were really good, and I want to share them just because they were just so good. So this first one is Elvi and her husband. So these are scientists trying to figure out what all's going on. And here's her husband. He's saying that whatever is getting the energy from doesn't play by our rules. We knew that, though. We suspected it. Do we know it now? We suspect it harder, Elvi said. We're scientists. We only know things until someone shows us we're wrong. Right? We have guesses, we have hypotheses, we have laws that in theory could be broken someday, right? Like, there is truths as we see them until somebody tells us otherwise. So yeah, that was a really interesting and sharp passage that I really liked. So this is Amos and Jim talking. Um, is the sensor data ready? I figured there'd be a few hours at least before they gathered enough to have a meeting about. Well, people don't know anything, Amos said. They love having meetings to talk about it. Yeah, I've felt like that sometimes at work, being in meetings and it's just, we're gonna talk about not what we don't know about, which is good. You got to learn and stuff, but that one just hit home. So, this one is Jim and Jim, but it is a longer passage, so bear with me. I absolutely believe that people are more good on balance than bad. All the wars and all the cruelty and all the violence. I'm not looking away from any of that, and I still think there's something beautiful about what we are. History is soaked in blood. The future probably will be too. But for every atrocity, there's 1,000 small kindnesses that no one noticed. 100 people who spent their lives loving and caring for each other. A few moments of real grace. Maybe it's only a little more than good than bad in us. And yet, we're about to consign millions of people to slow deaths. That's just the truth. Are you ready to do this thing? And it happens, right? So this is near the end, and Jim's trying to decide if he wants to cut off all of the ring gates, right? Humanity has expanded to the stars, but this unknown technology is, you know, polluting our universe, for lack of a better word, causing destruction. And so it's up to Jim. Does he decide to cut everybody off into their home systems and essentially section off humanity? There's planets that were trading with each other and they only survived because they couldn't grow everything they needed. They weren't self-sustaining, so they had to trade for it. So that's what the slow deaths was. Can each system survive on its own? And the answer was most likely not. And yeah, this whole series has been a blast. The Expanse, what's out there in space. This is a really interesting take on it, and it is supposed to be near future technology. So like the rocket ships, they have to turn around, right? They're not UFOs. They can't just like turn on a dime. They have to like turn around and have a braking burn. So that was really key. I thought that was really neat. They talk about growing fungus for food in the outer belt, right? You don't always have a sun right next to you to grow perfect plants, so they grow fungus. You know, animal meat really isn't a thing when you're out on a rocket ship. So great series, absolutely worth your time. Give it a read, and remember to buy your books used.